Jason, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing all right. Thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. The other Jason has joined as well. Gentlemen.
Hello.
While Brendan tries to get the audio straightened out, I'm happy to pinch hit. We're talking here, the title is SPAC Success as a Team Sport, right? What do people come to you and ask? What are the questions you're hearing most?
Sure. I think kind of just depends on which party we're interacting with and which ones we're helping out with. Because I think a big part of this is that there's obviously a number of participants. We have the sponsor group itself. We have the targets. So depending upon which party, we're trying to help out, it's either the target that's looking to try to become a public company as quickly as possible and work on that transition, whether it's IPO readiness or ensuring they're set to go from a deal perspective, from a tax standpoint, or if we're talking with the sponsor group, and that's really to help them get filed and potentially once they identify a target, are there other services we can help them with, whether it be due diligence or helping to evaluate whether or not that target makes sense for them.
What are the common misconceptions, Jason? Let's say whether you can give me from sponsor side, from acquisition side. What are some of the common misconceptions? Because I know when prospective team owners sit down with folks like Chuck and sports bankers, they need a nice little talking to about really what the process entails and what ownership is all about. What are some of the misconceptions you're hearing from some clients coming for advice?
Jason, I'm not sure if you want to start off on that one and I can add in.
Yeah, sure. So here's the thing. What I have learned is, and I probably deal a lot more with the operating companies that are going into the SPACs as I kind of help with more of the readiness. There's a few things that are coming into play here. One is a lot of these companies don't realize what's involved, right, with getting into the process, right? So they think that, look, it's a quick turn. I can get involved in this in 3 months. Yes, I know that I have to go through certain types of reporting type requirements, or I have to go through like a proxy type deal. But, other than that, I'm pretty kind of straightforward. I think it's just more of an informative range where what we're seeing is that a lot of the companies that are kind of aligning themselves for this, and I'll speak to the SPAC side in a second or let Jason kind of cover that. But on the target operating company side, I don't think that a lot of them are informed of what's involved in the process. So they think to themselves, look, we're really kind of looking at this from a lens of, this is a great opportunity. It's a quick rebound, excellent exit strategy. Valuations are high. This is kind of the process that we need to go through. We'll get through like steps 8, 1, 2, and 3 real quick, and then we'll be done. They don't realize though a lot of what goes involved with the entire SPAC process, how the merger agreement gets pushed through, and what are the backfalls from an SEC perspective on an ongoing basis. So I think, what we have been tasked to do, and Jason kind of alluded to some of the things that clients are coming and asking us, is really not just going through, the process of, kind of helping them through various different pitfalls for all various different kind of components of the SPAC transaction as well as readiness, but kind of being an informative lens for them as well to make sure that they're fully aware of all the various different items that they need to be, then they need to go through in the initial process as well as ongoing kind of post-transaction.
Yeah, I had talked to Mark Locke, one of our earlier guests, about company governance and understanding that it's better to have governance in place that makes it an attractive target. Melanie, let me ask you, because one of the questions is in the queue is, how are companies being acquired by the SPAC dealing with governance moving forward? It's hard if you don't have that process in place to then all of a sudden establish it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've focused so much on SPACs being attractive because it's speed to market, right? But the fact of the matter is, and I think Jason highlighted this too, there's a long road in preparation that the target companies need to really focus on, not only from a governance perspective, from a financial capability perspective. My area is tax specifically. There's a ton of planning there to engage in as well. And, Grant Thornton's client base is comprised of the middle market, which is, a high concentration of where these SPACs are looking to make acquisitions. So we're spending a lot of time really getting ahead of that thought process now, before we have kind of the heyday of 2021 and 2022, where a lot of these SPACs are going to be looking to close these deals. And Jason, Sandberg, you might actually have a little bit more insight on the governance aspects if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, I think, Scott, to your point, I think it certainly helps if the target companies have that structure in place to begin with. And if they're operating with that board and those folks that are capability of running with governance, because I think to even a point made earlier on the panel that preceded us, they have to be ready to be a public company. So it's one thing to go effective and have a merger approved, but then, day two, you are functioning effectively as a public company, and I think to Jason's point earlier, I think maybe, I don't know about a misconception, but just, I think the range of how long it might take from start to finish, and that could be a function of how ready the target is. Because if the target is ready with their required, PCAOB financial statements and whatnot, and other required disclosures that might have to go into the S4 or other merger documents, that could, make the process go very quickly, or it could be, a lengthy process with the back and forth with the SEC. So I think it just depends.
Focusing on what we do, obviously sports business, it's obviously a sexy topic. You're talking sports teams or even sports adjacent. We're hearing digital media, fitness companies, the like. What sort of action are you seeing in the sports adjacent space? Not necessarily buying a team, but things attached to sports world.
So I can take that. So sports, very similar to some other industries right now that are kind of what I would call trending industries, are really kind of related to how the world's revolving around, adjusting to various different techniques within COVID, and how industries are kind of responding to some of those things. So for instance, if we talked about fitness, for example, there's various companies from a home fitness perspective that are doing extremely well, and the markets kind of see that. So the support services within those realms would generally be deemed kind of an avenue that would be attractive to SPACs, right? Because the adjustment there is that, look, we're looking future, obviously we want to kind of look down the future from a roadmap perspective. But ultimately what we really want to get to is, where can we kind of grab an entity that has, the growth potential to grow 100, 200, 300% within a year or two given time. And that's kind of what the evaluations are kind of showing. From a sports perspective, I can't speak to teams necessarily, but if we're talking about support services, all right, as sports start to get back on track, and not just at the pro levels, but also at the younger levels, whether that be from, Pop Warner all the way up through various different avenues, what I believe that you'll start to see is that there's going to be a trend and a capacity for consumers to want to kind of, move forward with a lot of those companies again, and you're going to see a lot of growth. And then you'll see avenues where industry or, kind of beginning kind of new companies will want to get into that foray, just like they're doing in other industries right now, to kind of capitalize on current valuation metrics and so forth that are out in the marketplace. And then you'll start to see a lot more adjustment and a lot more heavy activity within kind of those spaces.
What is, if anything, what is the COVID effect in that we keep hearing about a pent-up demand, especially from a consumer side? Okay. Is that affecting what you're telling clients and what they're asking you?
Yeah, I think so. So ultimately, when I think of, kind of the COVID effect, all right, what I'm thinking of is various industries that were shut down, such as when we think about sports, hospitality, entertainment, things in that nature, all right, that really haven't had a lot of growth or movement in the last year. All right, when we start to see the turn of things and clients are starting to ask, do we kind of potentially see where there is an avenue for these industries now to explode, very much like some other ones that are in like tech spaces and so forth right now. And, ultimately it's going to be regulated based on, how the government achieves its goal of moving forward. How we're kind of doing, much with, people and the healthcare and so forth, which are industries right now that are very hot. And those are kind of, I don't want to call them bubble industries, but they're hot in the nature of there's a lot of growth potential. So when I think of the COVID effect, I think of the nature of coming out of the current environment that we've been in, which sets up industries and companies within those industries to start to be successful and grow.
What do you tell sponsors? Because this obviously has potential to be very lucrative for sponsors in that they get a big stake of the company as the clock is ticking. I keep hearing sponsors calling me, what are the targets? What should I get? Find me the next Genius Sports. How do you advise the sponsors as the clock ticks?
Yeah, and I think I think, and obviously Jason and Melanie could chime in too, but I think what's important is value for your shareholders and your investors, and finding the right target and that balance of what that deal looks like. Because I think also part of the sponsor's goal is to then go out and do this again, and you'll see folks with multiple platforms out there. So if the sponsor is not incentivized to act too quickly, in my opinion, it's really to identify that deal that maximizes value both for them and their shareholder base, which then provides their alignment with their investor group, which then is a good story for them going forward as they sponsor their next SPAC.
Melanie, take me inside a group meeting at Grant Thornton. What is being discussed inside your conference rooms that perhaps those on the outside, either sponsors, possible targets, or just onlookers of the SPAC space, don't understand or not thinking about?
I think for us, we tend to focus on two things. It's risk mitigation and value creation. And really that applies equally on the SPAC side as well as the target side. So making sure that you spend the proper time and diligence to identify any issues that could prevent the merger from ultimately consummating. So getting
what would be some red flags that would prevent a merger from consummating? Give me the top 2 or 3 red flags.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak about tax because it's near and dear to my heart. There are absolutely tax exposure issues, sales tax issues, tax structure issues that come into play when companies have been in high growth mode and maybe haven't focused as much on their governance of the tax function historically. Those are real dollars that come into play kind of late in the game if the company hasn't spent some time doing their homework up front. The other component of it on the value creation side of it, we're seeing a resurgence in tax receivable agreements in SPAC transactions. So what that allows for is for the target company's existing investors either in the transaction or related to NOLs or credits they've got on the books today to actually get an economic benefit for those tax attributes going forward. So that's something that's heavily negotiated in the merger agreement as well. So I think getting prepared to have those discussions and understand what those economic values of either the risks or the opportunities in the deal is what we really aim to focus on.
Has Grant Thornton chatted, and I know you're not going to give me the specific name of the team and owner, that would be fine, but what's it been like in terms of sports team owners or limited partners seeking your counsel on their options?
I can speak to that, and to your point, we're not going to offer any names publicly here, but I think there's certainly been a lot of interest from sponsor groups that are looking into this specifically in the sporting industry. We've actually seen, I think, to maybe the question earlier, there's probably a lot of opportunities for consolidation here, and to that point, when you have a successful merger with pipe investment that comes in, especially if the redemptions are managed, now you have excess capital. That aligns with an acquisition-oriented strategy, and in gaming, and we'll say even extended with media, it's probably a little bit of ripe for consolidation. So we've actually seen a lot of opportunities of people coming to us with ideas to kind of do a roll-up, and they have multiple targets in mind. So there's going to be 1 or 2 targets as part of the initial merger de-SPAC deal, but then the real strategy is then over the next 2 to 3 years is to do additional acquisitions with kind of related entities. So I think that I'm seeing that as kind of an ongoing theme and specific to kind of sporting and media.
Yes, the people I talked to said what's not being talked about enough, it's not just go find one target, it's about mergers. Let's bringing multiple companies together. And I assume you're doing plenty of due diligence for clients there. Jason, you talk about that aspect.
Yeah, the due diligence on various different clients that we're going through. It's enormous right now.
What is it compared to a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago?
Yeah, I would say that the activity related to specific diligence activities around acquisitions within this marketplace, I would say they're probably 300 to 400% higher than they were 3 years ago. Last year, it started trending in that route, right? As the capital markets started to fire up. But this year has just been an explosion one after another. And honestly, from my perspective, I really don't see that starting to decline anytime soon. At least not in the next year or two, right? Because there's still a lot more of this activity popping up. There's new SPACs forming up even, in the last month, and they're still going to have 24 months to close the deal. So So from that aspect, I think that that's great. From the diligence perspective, I would say that the diligence has become a little bit more difficult, and they're probably asking them to get a little bit more creative and tougher, because there's a little bit concern from a regulatory issue, right? And they want to make sure that they're covering their bases pre-acquisition, especially since these are going so quick, right? So they want to ensure that whoever they're going to grab, outside of the story that they've been told from an investor pack standpoint, really has kind of their numbers together from a reporting standpoint. Can they achieve the growth that they're suspecting that they are based on kind of their current environment?
Brendan, you want to finish it up? We have about a minute left.
Yeah, right at the end, like Spinal Tap. Well, yeah, apologies, but really, the one thing is one thing people say all the time is, if I'm a billionaire sports team owner, a SPAC's going to be a lot easier than an IPO, and I'm wondering if that's something you agree with, and kind of what is it about SPACs that makes it appealing for sort of sports owners, team owners? Sure,
I don't think it's easier, Brendan. So at the end of the day, I want to just point this out. I think the advantage of a sports team or an organization or a company going through a SPAC transaction is, one, it's quicker time to close, right? So they can move through this process in, a 3 to 6 month timeline rather than a 12 to 18, which obviously is huge theoretically given the valuations right now and quick cash, right, from a liquidity standpoint. In terms of the preparation though, and in terms of what these organizations / companies or whatever it may be have to go through, it's actually really similar to what they'd have to do down a traditional IPO metric. They still have to be a public company. Still have to be public company ready. They still have to go through all of the equations that the SEC is going to require them to do, and not just the SEC, but operationally and governance and all of that. So that's the key point, is that, although these are quicker to close, there are still a lot of different things and avenues that companies still need to achieve, just as they would through a traditional route.
Yep. Jason, Melanie, thanks so much. I'm sure you're thrilled, though. Buy side, sell side, everybody needs their tax advice. So it works all around for Grant Thornton.